Burkittsville, Maryland, 1825. A winter colder than any recorded in Frederick County. Locals spoke of a woman named Elly Kedward, accused of luring children into the woods. They found only a trail of small handprints pressed into the snow and a tree hung with twigs twisted into a circle. By spring, most who testified against her were missing. For generations, townsfolk dismissed it as punishment, not haunting, until 1940, when a local boy vanished by the same creek. Police reports mention unnatural stick figures hanging outside the searchers' tents. The artifacts now sit in a glass case at the Frederick County Historical Museum, collected under accession file about 1941 16W. Everyone thought it was just frontier folklore until the reports began repeating. Decades later, Hollywood would soften this story into shaky footage and student filmmakers. The town has never forgiven that. One clerk told me, "Don't film near the creek after dusk." The earliest traceable mention of Elly Kedward appears in a 1786 tax ledger from Blair Township, a settlement predating Burkittsville. Historians believe she was an Irish immigrant, a midwife who lived alone beyond the main street. A complaint lodged with the Blair Parish Book, December 23, 1785, accused her of drawing blood from children by needle and petitioning trade for sickness charms. In an era when smallpox scarred villages, her work was easily branded witchcraft. Two surviving pages from the parish record, now preserved at the Maryland State Archives, catalog MSA SC 122718, carry names of those who swore against her. Within a year, every one of them had either died of exposure or fled the boundary. The forest reclaimed her house, and then silence. But the story endured in oral accounts collected by folklorist Charles T. Austin, 1893, mothers warning children not to wander north of the creek where the woman waits with branches. No one wrote her confession, Austin notes, only the snow that took her son's prints away. During the winter of 1940, Frederick County Sheriff's files list 7 children missing near Tappy East Creek. Local farmer Herbert Winstead, interviewed for the Frederick News Post, February 12, 1941, described seeing a tall, pale woman, or something like her, followed by a line of small figures. Search parties found cairns and stick bundles arranged in spirals. Notably, the evidence articles 1422, photographed by Deputy Harold Green, February 22, 1941, show twigs tied with horsehair, consistent with 18th century protective tokens cataloged in the Maryland Folk Objects Inventory, Volume 2. The sheriff's official conclusion, animal predation, children lost in weather. But locals refused to enter the woods after dusk. By spring, one of the searchers, Green himself, was hospitalized for exposure, claiming footsteps kept circling the tent, but the snow never broke. When his notes were later filed into the Historical Museum archives, several pages were missing. Post-war years brought new developments. The origin site, once called Blair Township, had changed its name to Burkittsville in 1824 to avoid association. By the 1960s, those who recalled the children's disappearance were elderly. Local teacher Marjorie Sloan, recorded interview, 1977 Maryland Oral History Project, remembers the community's avoidance. "We didn't say which, we said woods. That was enough. 4 acres of the old village north lot were purchased by the state in 1979 for conservation. Yet, visiting surveyors noted that compasses malfunctioned near Black Rock Hollow. The files attribute it to iron deposits. Still, an internal memo from the Frederick County Parks Department, May 14, 1980, describes staff finding bundles made of birch twigs hung near a fallen monument. Object tags 8014AC list them as folk vandalism. The area was closed to public hiking that same summer. Sometimes, Sloan added, I think Burkittsville changed its name, but the woods didn't. A storm uprooted several trees in May 1985, uncovering remnants of cobblestone foundations beneath the hollow. Archaeologist Dr. Elaine Harwood, acting under state contract, recorded in her field notebook, now held at Frederick Historical Center, referee Harwood Log 85-05, that the soil smelled faintly of iron, animal bones mixed with human teeth fragments. Testing at the Maryland lab confirmed juvenile dentition, ages 8-12, but could not date them conclusively. News coverage was brief. Old grave found near Blair site. Frederick News Post, September 21, 1985. When interviewed years later, Harwood stated quietly, "They weren't buried. They were arranged." The museum declined to display the samples, transferring them to cold storage by 1987. The hollow sound of metal cabinets closing echoed through the basement archives as curators filed away the evidence. Dust settled on folders marked inconclusive. Outside, wind rustled through the forest canopy in patterns that seemed to follow visitors along the park boundary. This file seeds the burial circle motif later echoed in the Blair Witch Project. Among the museum's 1980s accessions lies a slim manila folder marked Local Correspondence Warnings. Inside, 8 handwritten letters addressed to whomever visits her ground. Postmarked between 1986 and 1991 from rural residents, the letters apologized to Miss Kedward for breaking branches and leaving litter near the creek. One, signed H.J., 1932, ends, "Please stop the knocking in the roof. I have burned the carvings. I will tell no one." Museum staff logged them as anonymous folklore donations. But in 1992, an electrician repairing the museum roof fell from scaffolding after reportedly hearing tapping from inside the display case. Maintenance Forms 9234 list causes startled. The letters remained on file, uncatalogued. Their brittle pages now curl at the corners, fingerprints visible along the edges where nervous hands once held them. In winter, the paper contracts, creating faint rustling sounds that museum night guards attribute to the heating system. "We've stopped mentioning it," one guard told a local reporter off record. "Some things are better left uncatalogued." By the early 1990s, Burkittsville had become a blip on paranormal enthusiasts' maps. Students from Towson and Montgomery collected lore, filming mock documentaries in the woods. One University of Maryland thesis, 1993 D. Marin, titled Regional Witchcraft Lore and Modern Anxiety, interviewed 3 residents. All refused to name the entity aloud. After one field trip, the students left behind rock piles arranged in pairs of 3, later recorded by Park Service Ranger Cliff Mayer. Their video cameras captured the stone arrangements through shaky handheld shots, the audio track picking up only wind and distant footsteps crackling through fallen leaves. When questioned, Mayer told the Gazette, August 1994, "They think it's cute until the wind changes." Within a week of publication, a lightning strike burned one equipment shed, the same storing confiscated cairn stones. Damage report Thafir 94 EFS still lists cause as indeterminate electrical. Even skeptics stopped night patrols for a season. The remains of the shed foundation can still be seen, blackened stones arranged in a rough semicircle that local maintenance crews refused to dismantle. Official record: Frederick County Sheriff log entry, Nagualran Narn 15, October 12, 1995. Report filed by 3 film students missing overnight, found dehydrated but unharmed near Black Hills Forest. Their camera was recovered. Tape contained audio interference every 47 seconds, followed by faint rhythmic clicking. Officer C. Raines's summary reads, "No criminal findings, audio to be archived." The same archived cassette, now labeled FCHFF 95A, was digitized in 2004, an exhibit occasionally shown during Maryland folkloristic seminars. The playback reveals static interrupted by what sound technicians identified as footsteps on forest floor and wood striking wood at regular intervals. Background voices fade in and out, inaudible except for one segment where a female voice clearly asks, "Did you hear that?" It inspired film graduates Eduardo Sanchez and Daniel Myrick, who cited the 1995 case in early concept notes for the Blair Witch Project. What was meant as a student experiment became a cultural ignition point, transforming a cluster of rural fears into broadcast myth. The tape remains stored in temperature-controlled archives, its plastic case showing signs of frequent handling, the label fading from repeated viewings. A string of trail closures began that winter, following equipment malfunctions from survey crews mapping the Catoctin area. A note in the Department of Natural Resources log, December 13, 1997, reads, 3 crews report compass loss within 5 minutes. Return signal restored only after removing metal stakes. Locals tied the lapse to the same radius of previous vanishings. A retired forester, Walter Klein, told interviewers for Culture and Fear Quarterly, 1998, "It doesn't matter what year you go. The Earth in that circle only lets go when it wants to." Soon after, production permits for the Blair Witch film were filed under Seneca Creek to avoid the name Burkittsville. Metal survey stakes pulled from the ground showed unusual corrosion patterns, their tips blackened as though exposed to extreme heat. The air near collection sites carried a faint metallic scent, like ozone after a storm. Recording equipment placed along the forest perimeter picked up temperature drops of 7 to 8 degrees without corresponding weather changes. The woods still had claim on it. Restoration crews reported finding stick bundles hanging from branches where no hikers had been permitted for months, the twine binding them still fresh, untouched by weather or wildlife. The Blair Witch Project was filmed in 1998 under pseudonymous working titles. The crew sourced folklore from Frederick County Library transcripts, oral file Scheck MHO 27, and earlier sheriff case logs. Interviewed in 1999, co-director Eduardo Sanchez stated, "We read the letters at the museum, the apology ones. They were frightening because they felt real." When the film premiered at Sundance, many assumed its footage was real. Burkittsville's population, under 200, faced sudden invasion by tourists. Locals would later file visitor complaints, County Record, August 1999, for graveyard tramping and theft of signage. Newspaper stands sold out of maps. Post office staff stopped answering questions about the real witch. Harwood, the archaeologist, received dozens of voicemails asking where she found the teeth. Her office answering machine filled with static-laden messages, some containing only silence, punctuated by what she later described as wooden tapping. The local newspaper printed a full-page statement from town officials. "Burkittsville has no witch. Please respect our privacy." But camera flashes continued to illuminate the forest edge at night, visible from bedroom windows where residents had installed new curtains to block the unwanted attention. The legend had escaped its boundaries. By October 1999, the film's cultural quake had turned the town's quiet myth into economics and desecration. Church sermons addressed it. Reverend Paul Renz of St. Paul's Lutheran wrote an open letter printed in the Frederick News Post, October 12, 1999. "The devil in this story is not Elly Kedward. It's what people will do for attention." The Frederick County Museum Board issued policy revisions prohibiting displays of objects alleged to cause distress or fear, leading to the sealed storage of all 1941 stick figures under accession numbers H16WA through G. Meanwhile, park staff reported increased vandalism of cairns and theft of stones. Curiously, by 2001, 3 employees filed medical leave citing recurring nightmares and auditory disturbances during inventory. No official link was made, but maintenance work order W-2113 closed with a handwritten note, "Stop filming it. She doesn't like that." The stick bundles, now sealed in climate-controlled storage boxes, were photographed quarterly to document any deterioration. Curator notes indicate that the horsehair bindings have never shown signs of aging, despite their exposure to elements for decades before collection. They appear, one preservation specialist noted, suspiciously pristine. During the film's 10th anniversary retrospectives, documentarians and skeptics revisited Frederick County archives. Archivist Linda Chase digitized Green's 1941 photos for preservation. She later told Baltimore Sun feature writer Keith Hampson, October 2010, "Half the images came out fine. Half have fog over the centers like breath on glass. The digital restoration file names still preserve their original references, 41 Green Shadow 1, TIF, 41 Green Shadow 7.tf. The museum refused public release due to community sensitivity. Still, that restriction spurred renewed rumor online. What are they hiding? Every act of silence seems to animate the legend again. The scanner used for digitization malfunctioned 3 times during the process. its glass surface showing what technicians described as temperature differential patterns that disappeared when the equipment was moved to a different room. The photographs themselves remain in acid-free sleeves, their corners showing the yellow tinge of age while the centers maintain unusual clarity. "We've had 5 requests for high-resolution copies this month alone," Chase noted in her quarterly report. "I keep telling people they're just old forest pictures. No one believes me." When the museum quietly reopened part of its folklore wing in 2014, one display included copies of early photographs sealed behind glare-proof glass. Within weeks, staff reported that the twig figures shifted alignment overnight. Security cameras recorded no intrusions, but did capture sudden light flares. Facility log entry, 2014 OCT 27, @TNB Rusk. 2 apology letters fell from their mount without disturbance. A notice was posted, "Please do not tap the glass." One volunteer quit, stating she heard a breath in between the displays. Her resignation letter, filed in Human Resources folder 14 VOLT, notes simply, "I cannot continue working near items that move when I turn away." The footage remains stored on encrypted drive Fred Exhib 2014A, accessible only by curatorial authorization. Visitors who linger too long near the display report a slight temperature drop, the glass fogging briefly when viewed from certain angles. Maintenance checks show no drafts or ventilation issues. The display lighting dims unexpectedly during tours, though electricians have replaced the wiring 3 times. What was meant as historical preservation has become its own continuation of the story. Documentation creating new chapters in the myth. It meant to contain. Present day. Burkittsville remains a 2-street town bordered by the same woods, its signs stolen yearly by thrill seekers. Locals rarely grant interviews. At the museum, the case file sits under calm fluorescent light. Accession ledger, stick figures, apology letters, each tagged and motionless. During the last recorded log entry, June 2022, a new intern noted faint fingerprints inside the newly cleaned display glass. There's no record of any object having been removed. The file ends here. But ask any archivist in Frederick County what happens when someone mocks the tale, and they'll likely tell you what one clerk told the narrator off camera while closing the folder. It doesn't matter if you believe in her. She believes in being remembered. Visitors still leave apologetic notes at the forest edge. Museum staff collect them monthly, adding them to an unnamed box in storage. They don't require cataloging anymore. The pattern is too familiar. The cabinet holding the oldest evidence has been relocated twice after staff reported hearing faint tapping from inside after hours. Security cameras occasionally lose signal near that section of the archive. The story preserves itself, passing from record to record. The narrator signs the visitor log, replaces the folder carefully, and, against protocol, whispers an apology to the glass before leaving. The camera remains focused on the sealed case until the museum lights switch off, leaving only the faint reflection of branches in glass. Behind the display, preserved in climate-controlled darkness, the original stick figures hang suspended in their sealed containers. They cast no shadows under the museum's carefully positioned lighting. Their arrangement forms a pattern that museum staff have never officially documented, but silently maintain. Every year, the Historical Society receives funding requests to digitize the entire Burkittsville collection. Every year, the archivists find reasons to delay. The artifacts remain physical, tangible, contained behind glass and sealed with institutional silence. What began as frontier justice became local folklore, then cultural phenomenon, and finally, archival legacy. The curators maintain their distance, rarely speaking of the objects they preserve. But in the visitor log, patterns emerge, entries that end with small apologies, signatures that trail off, names never completed. The archive sustains itself, requiring only remembrance to continue. The record remains open.